If you use a LinkedIn lead generation agency to try to grow your business, you're most likely going to lose a lot of money. Why is that? Well, let me explain. So first, for anyone who's thinking about using a LinkedIn lead generation agency or has actually done so in the past, I totally understand why you might want to do this. I get it. Obviously, they promise you 10, 20, 30 booked calls a week. Maybe they'll even give you some guarantees. And they say you don't really need to do anything. It's all automated, which obviously sounds great because you're busy and you're stressed and you're juggling all of these hats. And LinkedIn is obviously a great channel. And if you're not on there yet, you might feel as though it's just this like massive untapped goldmine of potential filled with software companies and B2B and enterprise. And obviously there's so much money that can be made there. And if your competitors are profitable on that channel and you're not, it's obviously a little bit of a waste. And of course, these agencies, they make it sound as though they are so good at what they do, so much better than you could ever be yourself at LinkedIn lead generation, that you want to feel as though, you know what, here's this expert, why don't I just trust them instead? But the reality is, it's a big lie. In the past 4 years, I've tried using LinkedIn lead generation agencies, and none of them have really worked. And as I've built up my own coaching and consulting practice, I've had so many of my clients coming to me with horror stories about them trying to use LinkedIn lead generation agencies, and it hasn't worked for them either. And the reasons why these programs are typically so unprofitable is the same thing every single time. And the first reason why is because they make massive claims that they can never really follow through on. And it's because of marketing. They know that if they don't make these insane guarantees saying that they could generate you 20, 30, 40 calls every single month, that they're not going to be able to get you in as a client or even to get you to accept a sales call with them. But once you're hooked, of course, the results never end up actually fulfilling to the way that they initially promised. So you as a client are left unhappy. And then of course, you're going to probably churn within 3 months or 6 months, however long the contract is. You'll have lost a lot of money, but by then they've already made their money back in return. And then they can just continue this model of bringing on clients, probably having 50% or more of them leaving very, very quickly, but then they've still made their profit. It's ultimately an unsustainable model of business for the agency as well, because their reputation will eventually tank and then they'll implode. But for that year or two that they're running their business, they're probably going to make a good amount of money. Any company whose goal is to actually just get you to sign up as a customer instead of prioritizing your results, that is a recipe for disaster. Now, reason two is that they just generally do a very poor job at delivering results. Now let's break down why that might actually be. Now, the first factor that goes into why they just can't get great results is because as an agency, they're oftentimes juggling 5, 10, 15 concurrent clients that they're simultaneously trying to support. Now, these agencies, they're always trying to keep their costs low. So they might only have one account manager for every 3 to 5 or even 10 customers. So every account manager can only spend so much time on each customer. And oftentimes that means they have to take shortcuts. Oftentimes that means they don't really take the time to get to know you and your brand, your story, your offering. And the reality is, if they're taking significant shortcuts here, then they're not going to be able to create lead generation campaigns that are actually effective. Think about it. A lead generation campaign, for it to be good, it needs to have really strong copy. It needs to have a certain level of personalization. It certainly needs to have a deep understanding of your audience's psychology and of the value proposition that your company and your offer brings to the table. Without this, you simply can't do the split testing that you need to succeed. You simply cannot speak the language that your customers need to be spoken with for them to actually feel as though you understand their problems enough to then go and solve it. Your agencies will never take the time to actually do these things because they're too busy, right? They're juggling too much. So the sacrifice ends up coming at the cost of your campaigns, where it isn't resonant, where they don't do the follow-ups that are needed, where they don't actually do enough tests or have enough creatives that they could essentially compare against to ultimately find the most optimal campaign. For them, these shortcuts, these cutting of corners obviously allows them to make their campaigns more profitable. This ultimately hurts you at the end of the day. And of course, 3 months or 6 months down the road, because the results are poor, you might leave, you might churn. But like I had said before, those 3 to 6 months that they ended up working with you, they'll make their 50 to 60% margin. And then even though you walk away, they've made their money back and they can just continue this model of replacing you with a new client and churning and burning as time progresses on. Now, how does this actually manifest? I'm sure you've been on the receiving end of many campaigns from people trying to do cold messages on LinkedIn or even email, right? So you actually have gone through this yourself and you know exactly what this feels like. Getting spammy messages, which are very unpersonalized, where the company is just providing you this super generic pitch with zero relevancy to you. And then when you get it, you roll your eyes, you probably just delete the message and you move on with your day. These companies are pretty much just blasting thousands of messages every single week, playing this volume game and hoping that some percentage of the recipients are going to respond, when in reality they don't. And it's only going to get worse moving into the years forward, where if you're just doing this volume model, spray and pray approach, rather than building trust or personalizing, it's only going to get harder for you to actually generate results with outreach. Now, the third reason why these campaigns also tend to fail is because you really just don't have any control over the campaign itself. Remember, this is an agency, so they are going to keep all their trade secrets in a black box away from you. Because obviously, if you know exactly how you can generate results without them, then you're not going to really want to work with them anymore. And that's why, even if they do run a successful campaign, you're not going to really be able to know what is leading to that success. What is the copy that they're using? What is their follow-up strategy? What is the set of technologies and automations that they're oftentimes using? None of this you're going to be given access to. So it'll end up being like a heroin addict just being hooked and going back to their drug dealer week after week, month after month, because they need their fix, because without the fix, they are screwed. If you become reliant on an agency because they actually are effective at generating you results, then you can never really remove yourself from being on their payroll, essentially. That's $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 that you're spending every single month on their services that you can't unlock. So if that's the pathway that you're moving down, I hope you're willing to keep that wallet open, because that's what they're going to be expecting of you. But like I had said before, the odds of them actually succeeding is pretty small. And what I just mentioned is essentially giving them the benefit of the doubt that they will succeed. But what happens if they do fail? Their campaigns that they're testing don't work. Well, the lack of control that I mentioned will end up being an issue here as well, because let's say you were to run your own campaign. If things are not going very well, you could just pretty much test it and change it and optimize it yourself. You can try out new subject lines. You can try out new lead lists. You can try out new copy. But with an agency, when things are not really working well, you have no ability to go in and try to change things. You have no ability to actually edit or adjust or modify the campaigns to see if you could make it better. You're hoping that the agency will actually take the time to then do those modifications in order to make your campaign perform better. But once again, the problem is that the agency doesn't really operate like that. When they're juggling so many different campaigns for so many different clients, and yes, the agency will probably spend some time in modifying and optimizing the campaigns of their most highest valued customers. You know, the customers that are probably paying them the most amount of money, maybe 10 grand, 15 grand, 20 grand and beyond. But if you're just a normal client that has come in 3 to 6 months ago and you're paying a couple $1,000s, the reality is these agencies are probably building in to their business model the idea that you're going to churn. They're probably just not going to spend that much time trying to optimize your campaign. Their job is done because they already got you to sign up for those initial 3 to 6 months. An even worst case scenario is that they don't know how to optimize. You really have to remember, some of these agencies, in the name of cutting costs, the account managers that they actually end up hiring to support your campaigns are Filipino VAs. And nothing against Filipino VAs. I actually employ a couple myself. They're really good at what they do. Data admin, repetitive tasks. But when it comes to strategic decision making and actually trying to optimize marketing campaigns to be highly profitable, they're not necessarily the best at it. So if these are the types of talent that these agencies are oftentimes hiring, which once again, they're absolutely hiring these types of people to be account managers, then when things go wrong, even if the campaign manager wants to fix things, they don't necessarily know how, and then once again, you're left in the dust. And the fourth reason why this is typically not going to be a good idea to work with another outside agency for LinkedIn is, frankly, they're just not that incentivized to generate you deals. if you look at the fine prints, a lot of their claims are around booking you meetings, generating you pipeline. Oh, I can help you get an extra 10, 20, 30 sales calls this month. And obviously, we do want that. But what do we want more? Meetings or closed deals? The thing is, just having more meetings doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to be closing more deals. In fact, many times, just trying to have as many meetings as possible actually will fly in the face of that goal. Because what if all these meetings are actually poor quality meetings? What if they are the wrong prospects, the wrong buyers, they are not really your ideal avatar at all? If your agency owner is trying to optimize around just booking meetings, and then what they end up doing is not really qualifying at all, or they get a bunch of people who are never a good fit to begin with into your calendar, not only will you not generate the revenue and close deals that you're looking for, but you'll end up wasting a ton of time and getting frustrated that your calendar is essentially filled with junk. And this has happened so many times. My clients have told me so many horror stories about this. It's important that you try to avoid this as much as possible. And here's the thing, right? Despite all of what I just said, most of these agencies will still cost you an arm and a leg, $3,000 to $5,000 per month, just to try to deliver you this service. Most of the time with no guarantees, and most of the time failing to actually hit the number of meetings that they're essentially setting for themselves as a KPI. And even if they do, quality of the meetings isn't even really that great. Reason number 5, these agencies will pretty much never follow up. And this is actually something that's really important in regards to LinkedIn outreach, because if you think about LinkedIn outreach, the goal of the campaign should never be to just try to pitch them right out of the gate. And I've talked about this before. That's a shortcut that many agencies make because they don't really want to take the time to have back and forth conversations. So just sending out the initial message to be, hey, my name is Tom. I have this amazing offer for you. Do you want to jump on a call? For them, that's the easiest type of campaign to set up because it's 100% automated. There's no need to have a back and forth conversation. But the issue is that this type of campaign has the lowest conversion results because no one just wants to be pitched out of nowhere by a stranger. The best LinkedIn campaigns are always more conversational in nature, where you're asking qualification questions, where you're actually trying to figure out what their problems are. For example, if you're doing some sort of like business development type of coaching company like I do, instead of just saying, hey, I can generate you $1 billion, instead I can ask them like, hey, how is your business these days in terms of lead generation? Where are you generating most of your leads from? Are you hitting your goals these days in regards to lead generation, right? So now I'm actually asking some qualification questions, which will get us into a conversation where hopefully they'll tell us some problems. And once they give us some problems, then we'll be able to essentially pitch them, hey, we can jump on a call and we can actually help you with some recommendations on how you can fix these issues. It's a much more conversational and relationship-driven way to actually book a meeting with them, and it works significantly higher. But the downside is that obviously you need to be willing to spend the time to have that back and forth chit-chat, which agencies are never willing to do. So they'll just set up these like very canned campaigns where you're making the pitch right away, no follow-up, no ongoing conversation. And this is something that if you were to do, you would get way better results. So what should you be doing instead? And the old saying is this, right? Feed a man a fish and they'll be fed for one day. But teach a man to fish and they'll be fed for life. It's the same thing, right? If you just learn how to build out the internal systems, then you'll be set for life. But if you rely on an outside vendor, you're probably going to be then reliant on them forever, or they might just fail altogether and you've wasted your money. But the beautiful thing is, this is really not that complicated to build. If you actually knew how simple it often was for these agencies to execute in their backend, you would never actually want to work with them because you would realize that you could just do this all on your own, easily. Because here's what an agency would actually be doing, right? They would first onboard you, and then they would write some copy that makes sense for your business, and then they would build some prospect lists that would make sense for your business, probably just using Sales Navigator. Then they would just attach that copy into a software tool, probably Dripify or Ulink or one of those, and then they would just click start. And then every single day, the software will just send out a certain number of messages to a certain number of prospects, and it'll be happening all in the background on autopilot. And then, of course, if meetings get booked, they'll take credit, even though really they barely had to put any energy into setting up that campaign. All this stuff you could do alone. You could create your own copy, but it could be better because you actually know your business. You can create your prospect lists, but once again, better because you understand your buyer more in depth. The automation tools are really, really cheap. You could be getting access to a license for less than $100 a month, which obviously the agencies don't want you to know, because if you did, then you wouldn't be spending thousands of dollars with them every single month. So these are all things that I would recommend. That's exactly what we do. We're not an agency model. We're more of the coaching and consulting model, where we will show you how you can actually implement this for yourself much, much cheaper, and the results are significantly more effective. You obviously have more control over the entire campaign because it's ultimately under you, and then you never need to pay any of these ridiculous recurring costs, okay? If that makes sense, then why don't you just book a call with us below and we can potentially help you out.